Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.
Welcome back to Missions Pulse, where we encourage you to know God's heart and join His mission. Super excited about this conversation today. It's going to be a unique one because this is my first time to actually see Mr. Jeffrey Breedwell face to face. We've been chatting a little bit before we started recording, of course, but prior to that, we've never even had a Zoom meeting or Zoom call. However, after meeting on Twitter, we actually connected, and he did the entire book, The Mind of a Missionary, as an audiobook, brought it to life in a powerful way. And Jeff, I'm super excited to have you on, and welcome to the show, man.
I'm super excited, and I'm insanely excited to see your face and your voice at the same time.
I get that a lot.
Without having an email?
I get that a lot. People are super excited to see my face. I don't know what it is.
I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that the image on the back of the book is just slightly larger.
Yeah, and man, I mean, it's been this. You have to catch me up a little bit. You told me a little bit how we connected, but how is it that someone who I've never met, never had a face to face with, out of the blue, you're like, hey, I want to do your audiobook. I mean, this is a big job. I don't know if people realize to do an entire audiobook is no joke. And you spent, a couple, 3 months on it, 4 months.
It was 3 months while I was also working full time.
Yeah, and that's what I so appreciated. And you brought this entire book to life in unique ways. Catch me up on how did all this happen?
I think the biggest part is I got your book first on Amazon. I was looking through different books while I was studying for my MDiv, and I read it. It, literally almost like kicked me in the gut, just hurt.
Sorry about that.
It really challenged me. And then when you talked about doing an audiobook on your Twitter, I was like, oh, okay, well, let me try. And I was just like, hey, I'll do Mind of a Missionary for you. And you just like, okay, great. We start typing back and forth, and all of a sudden, 3 months later, 4 months later, somewhere around there, we've got a new audiobook, and it's being promoted on everywhere. And I love it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. And I have to, first of all, express my appreciation and gratitude. I mean, we were talking a minute ago, too. You brought this book to life not in the typical just audiobook fashion, because I quote, I can't remember how many missionaries I interviewed, 250 maybe, or 200.
Yeah.
And not all of them found their way into the pages of the book, but those who did. And then you have these historical, even legendary missionaries like Hudson Taylor, and then you got the C.T. Studs, and they're all from different places, right? You got the Andrew Murray from South Africa. You have Kiwis, Australians, Northern Irishmen, British.
You've got Germans in there with Nicholas von Zinzendorf.
The Zinzendorfs. And you turn them all alive because you got this amazing ability of doing accents. Are you going to give us like a little show here, a little taste of how this even works?
Well, I mean, if you need me to, dancing for you, certainly can.
Okay, you do that.
No problem.
That's Kiwi. I hear Kiwi.
Yep, so you hear the Kiwi. Okay, look, the biggest part about the whole audiobook thing is that while I'm doing it, I got to make sure I'm supporting the Sox while I'm doing it.
We don't even need to guess.
We got to go for the Sox. We got to go for the ball. That's the biggest part. Then, we got to hop across the pond to have a wee bit of time. Have something go on about. Oh, then we can, just hop across the other channel and have a great, wonderful time over a pint, and maybe we'll go for a walk later.
Yeah.
And have a wonderful time. Or you want to go for a walk, do you? Right. Okay, here we go.
That's not even Scottish right there. That's Braveheart. You went from London. You went from London to Dublin to Glasgow, but then you took me to Braveheart right there.
I did. I took you back in time.
Yeah, yeah. I heard William Wallace come out of you.
Right. Freedom.
So how did you learn all these accents? I mean, you brought The Mind of a Missionary to life because it's fun to listen to. My first book, I mean, not my first book, but the first audiobook I did, which was Gospel Privilege, up here somewhere behind me. I did myself, and I'm happy with it as it came out good, but it is completely different than The Mind of a Missionary because it's like listening a little bit to Adventures in Odyssey with all these live characters. I felt like I was listening to, a mature version of Adventures in Odyssey, although sometime it veered toward immaturity as far as the bloopers and outtakes that I heard.
Adventures in Odyssey.
So how did you learn all these accents?
So I grew up on the stage, and my dad would do local productions and local plays, and I would be baby Jesus to Oliver Twist, which is really what started the British accent. And then as I started getting more and more interested, I learned stand-up comedy, and I got really big into Saturday Night Live. And this was around the time of Mike Myers and Dana Carvey and Chris Rock and Chris Farley, and really
back when
got
Saturday Night Live was good.
Yeah, that's when Saturday Night Live was good, and then it started getting worse, and then it got good again, and then it started going downhill, and then that's another tangent. Anyway, really started learning that and learning how they did those. And then I started really listening to people. I would meet people from different parts of the world, and especially would just really love to hear how they sounded. I would love to watch newscasts and watch how people sounded from both the UK or from Ireland or India, or like to hear them talk from China if they were Chinese and were learning English for the first time. It was really interesting to get to talk to them back and forth. And it was very interesting as well because I had a couple of Kiwi friends. I would have a couple of Aussie friends, and we'd all go back and forth. They would tell me my accent's horrible, and then I'd go back on YouTube and look at the tutorials. But it's that type of just worldly love that I got to really appreciate, and got to really appreciate the culture and who these people are and their history with what they're experiencing. And I really just love to honor it.
You said worldly love. I think you mean the love of people in the world. Just
not the buzzword that means like I love Lady Gaga's pointy things. No. That's another topic for another time.
Probably not on Missions Pulse too. But as you say that, I've somehow sensed your personality probably extroverted, I imagine, not introverted so much. Or do you have an introverted side to you?
I do have an introverted side to me. I do.
I think we all do.
Where there's times, right, where it gets really exhausting.
Yeah.
Doing this, and you just want to take time and rest. Like Robin Williams was a huge case study with that, where he would challenge himself as far as an actor's concerned, rather than being the happy, funny, silly guy who's really quick, just ready and ready to go. But when he got off of that and when he was done, he would be really depressed.
Yeah.
And would be really sad because there's an inequality in many things, especially across life, right? So with that, it kind of started and then tragically ended because of the disease that he had. But it was that type of mindset that really kind of helps me, and actually helps me understand that rest is essential.
Sure. Going back to SNL, the same story or similar one could be said of, say, Chris Farley. Chris Farley. I mean, but what I love about what you just said a second ago, seems like you have this innate ability or desire to learn from and just enjoy people.
Yeah.
you could hear it in the accents. You pull out all these accents. Not everybody can do accents in general, but someone who does accents must have spent some time listening to the sounds and intonations of people from other parts of the world. What caused this love for people and appreciation of kind of the individuality of who they are?
A lot of it was Jesus. Like,
Okay.
just being able to really what it means to love your neighbor and to really experience who they are. You know, being able to say, okay, look, I'm not the star of my own show. I may be a background character or a guest star in somebody else's show, but there's a lot of lore for them. There's a lot of history for them, and I just love hearing it. And then even while they're telling me or while they're reading it, I want to hear and see and visualize all the stuff that's going on to make it as real as it is for them, to try to make it as real as it is for me, so I can really connect with them for who they are.
We have a bunch of career opportunities for you to serve at Within Reach Global. Open positions include web developer, social media manager, graphic designer, short-term missions director, and more. We want to help you discover your unique God-given calling to take the gospel to the ends of the earth. Help give gospel access to people who have never heard of Jesus before. Go to withinreachglobal.org and click go.
I would call that incarnational ministry. I mean, I think there's a lot of times when we're doing ministry and we're reaching out and we're sowing into the lives of others, but there's a difference when you stop and you actually connect with a person. It becomes less that kind of professional minister feel, and you become part intrinsically of their story, and you understand, like you just mentioned, the lore of their life, the cultural mores of who they are. And I think that's a powerful aspect we're probably missing a lot in the church, entering into the lives of those who are probably suffering empathetically, sympathetically, so as to draw out their story and draw them closer to Jesus.
Absolutely. Empathy is honestly one of the first tools that Jesus uses, is empathy. In fact, if you read all of Jesus's words with empathy in mind, then it comes across less of a holier than thou and more of a brotherly love or older brother love.
Yeah.
That you don't get from anywhere else, because it's a spiritual side as well as fraternal. So much like you would a mentor to a mentee, like with Peter when he's on the water and he says, "Oh, ye of little faith," mainly it's like, "Oh, ye of little faith," instead of "ye of little faith."
That when you say it like that, I think these are the intonations we often miss. And this is what this is why I keep pointing back to how you took the mind of a missionary and turned it into something animated, alive, Adventures in Odyssey-esque. We often don't even read the Bible with the intonations of Jesus too. I mean, when he's being, interrogated by the leaders of his day, and they say, "Are you the Son of God?" No answer. "Are you the Son of God?" No answer. Third time, "People are saying you're the Son of God. Are you or not?" And he says, "Oh, you're saying I'm the Son of God?" I think there's this aspect of the playfulness and wittiness of Jesus that we miss because we're reading it in such a the voice that you just mentioned. "This is God, and you shall listen to me," right? Instead of hearing the deeper, or even when he's having that interaction with the lady, the woman who comes before him and said, "Please, Lord, can you heal me? Help me." And he says, "No, I can't help the dogs." And she says, well, even the dogs get fed from the crumbs of the master's table, right? It sounds like this horrible interaction that Jesus has with this woman, but I almost imagine it. I don't know what the reality is, but I almost imagine it like this playful jest between Jesus and her, as if he's poking fun at the would-be naysayers. Oh yeah, you know what they say, the dogs. I think there's this jest about these conversations and personality that we miss. And somehow I feel like you're stumbling upon it somehow.
Oh, thanks. I definitely think that there's a lot of personality that we're missing when it comes to reading the Bible, and reading from a sense of that when we hear God's voice from the text, a lot of us will think within that voice of on high that was made famous within the Charlton Heston movie, The Ten Commandments. And, you shall name 10 commandments, all those things. But then when it's put into the tone of Moses, you shall make 10 commandments, okay? We're going to spell it out, and this is the way it's going to be because you're new at this. So let's help it out just a little bit. You get that tone of love and that tone of a father figure. And then when you go with Jesus, like with the woman at the well, one of the best examples of that story for me was in The Chosen, season 2 and episode 1, where the actor who plays Jesus, and if you're watching this, bro, please forgive me, I forgot your name off the top of my head. But he does such a wonderful job of being who Jesus is in that time of the character. But he also mentions in spirit and in truth, and he punches that he punches it with firmness, but it's like a direct love.
Yeah.
Which like in spirit and truth, where a lot of the times we miss what that means. We miss what it means to, actually be truthful, that, hey, you don't know what you're doing over there, but over here, that's fine too. They really don't know what they're doing either. But the Father doesn't care as long as you're doing it in spirit and in truth.
Yeah.
That's the part that matters.
I hear the empathetic tone in your voice, but a second ago, and I think The Chosen does this so well, it brings a different characterization to Jesus that we may have missed before. But a second ago, when you were doing Charlton Heston, he was Moses, or God and Moses, and then you switched to that fatherly voice and kind of almost friendly. Why did it sound a little bit sacrilegious to me? Why do you think that some people will hear this and say, well, you are talking about the God of the universe and Jesus, God incarnate among men. And so when you introduce a tone or a personality we're unfamiliar with in Christendom or in Christian speak, it sounds a little sacrilegious. Like, I don't know if I can accept Jesus in this way, just like I can't accept, Eugene Peterson's The Message. Are you not getting that?
No, well, and here's the thing that I have with that. We have a long history, nearly 1,800 years worth of hearing this regality with God and with Jesus. We had this, it was kept in with as far as history is concerned, with the history of the church. We had this regality that was passed down from the separation between the Israelites, the priests, and the covenant. But then after all of that became lost, and then we had, after the 500 years and we had Jesus come, and Jesus is here, we, for some reason, still kept that. We kept that Roman-esque quality, much like they did for the early services, because they had no idea what to do. But it was that type of mindset that we still kind of lost. We lost the fact that he is our Father, and then we lost the fact that, or we missed the connection, rather, of that a father is the first instance in which a child is able to make a connection to God. That when they see their father, or any parental figure for that matter, it's that mindset of, hey, look, who that person is the embodiment of God to me. But not actually taking the title, or taking, the spiritualness, but it's the imagination. It captures the mindset. So much like when Paul writes, parents, do not exacerbate your children. Don't do that, because it doesn't accurately say who God is. And if God is love, and he is patient, and he is kind, and he is wonderful, and does not relish within evil, and he isn't prideful, then he wants to be on the level. He wants to be on the same level that you are, even though he carries all of this weight that we don't have to see. Much like a father carries all of that weight that the child can't see.
Yeah.
And it's that important part that I think has been missed for 1,800 years. Thanks to Hermas, the Bishop of Rome. Good job, buddy. I just recently discovered that fact. But anyway.
You sound so much smarter when you drop a name like that, though.
I know. I drop her name. Thank you, Hermas, Bishop of Rome, with your sacrilegious book that steered everybody in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You do sound incredibly intellectually charged, though, when you say that. So that was very helpful.
Well, I'm not trying to.
Gospel Privilege provides the keys you need to unlock your full potential as an effective witness of God's kingdom power. This resource will inspire change in you as you read testimony after testimony of people who use their gospel privilege to bring the kingdom message worldwide. As author David Joannis testifies, gospel privilege is the soul-saving, culture-shaping, world-changing message that's come into the world through the person of Jesus. It is an unearned spiritual advantage with eternal consequences meant for every human being. Buy the book on Amazon or visit gospelprivilege.com to download a free chapter today.
But yeah, I think you're right. And that's why I think things like Chosen and even that incarnational ministry I mentioned a moment ago that you seem to gravitate towards, it's understanding the multifaceted nature and characteristic of God. He is not just that voice. In the same way that I have tickle torture with my daughters, and then we have a serious conversation, and then we play and we mess around, and then I'm teaching her something. It's
right.
This multidimensional, multifaceted aspect or characteristic of God. And
right.
When you spend time with lots of different people from different places, you kind of begin to put together, if we're the image of God and everyone is made in his image to mirror his image, the Imago Dei imprinted on all these different people, then he must be incredibly multidimensional, because there's a lot of different difference and nuance in all these different people.
Right. And it's fantastic. I often say we're like we're all different shades of coffee. Some have got more milk and sugar than others, but we're all the same color of toast.
No, you have to go back to coffee, because in the end, that's
it's much better, because we also, when we're placed in the right situation, people will encourage other people and will help other people along on a much faster level, such as coffee, than toast.
Oh, true. Absolutely agree with that.
But if we have toast, I am waiting for that heavenly avocado to come down. That'd be great.
You truly are a millennial. What are you, a millennial? How old are you?
I am. I was born in 85.
85. Okay.
So I'm like one of those like elder millennials. I've got the staff that I'm gonna bring out.
You shall not pass, but still do your avocado toast.
I'm gonna be like, okay, I still remember the 90s, and Doug, but I challenge you to a game of Double Dare.
And then the younger millennials like double. Sorry, come again.
Double. I'm sorry. You're saying what again? You remember Doug? Like
Millennials. Millennials watching. I apologize on behalf of my millennial friend here. I will go full screen.
Hey, see, yeah, if you see the
That man
staffs
right there.
on the side, there's the one with two ropes,
Yeah.
two rope handles. There is a very interesting story behind that.
I think this is the perfect segue into that story.
Okay.
And then after you tell us that story, catch us up on your story. Because who in the world are you, really? I mean, that's the question we're really trying to figure out. I know there's a lot of voices inside your head with different accents. But start with the staff.
There is. Okay, so starting with the staff, that is not on this side, it's on the other side. I was in the Navy,
Okay.
the United States Navy for 7 years, 9 months, and 21 days, and about 45 seconds. And I counted, while I'm along those times, in February of 2016, I had a mental breakdown that was spurred on by being hit with a metal, not a pipe, but like a metal plate on my last patrol on my sub, right here.
Wow.
It was a minor concussion, but I've had previous concussions before, and I was on this breakdown. We had our 5th miscarriage, my wife and I, at the same time, like a week later. I mean, it was nuts. So one right after another, and I could not deal. I was in a new position, and there was a lot of stress coming from the boat life, where everything is now, to a shore duty, which is a little bit like civilian life, where things are slower.
Yeah.
And when I got there and I'm learning how to teach and I'm instructing people on how to do certain things, my brain decided, nope. And it went back to a flashback of me being sexually assaulted when I was 8.
Wow.
And that encouraged my body to even further say nope. And it made my left arm pretty much useless. It started jolting and started kind of going back and forth where I couldn't control it. I was getting very weak because of my muscles starting to do this, and I was the medication that the docs decided to put me on was making me very weak as well, would make me very dizzy. And we had to walk everywhere on base. Being in the military, you've got to walk everywhere, for the exercise. So for me, walking up those hills, and I was in Groton, Connecticut, and if you've never been there, Groton, Connecticut is in the Appalachian Mountains right next to the Atlantic Ocean. So it's right where they meet, like colonial times, right there in the Rocky Coast. The hills are quite literally this.
Wow.
Many times. So when I would walk, I would get all this weird stuff. So God has me kind of go out and meditate and just read the scriptures to him while I'm in lunch. And I'm praying through the scriptures and listening for God and listening for his voice. And a fox suddenly appears behind me. I'm like, oh, hey, buddy. What's going on, Fox? How you doing? You want some? And it scares me because I think it's a coyote. Is it going to attack me? What's it going to do?
Yeah.
And we just kind of stare at each other after I do that, and then it just kind of leaves. But then I see that stick laying on the ground, and God's like, hey, take this. And don't like, take this for protection right now. I was like, okay. And then a couple of weeks later, he comes back and he says, okay, look, that stick that you had, take it, do not get it wet, and fashion it into a staff. And I was like, okay.
And that's the one.
That's cool.
And that's the one right behind you there that you're talking about.
That's the one that's right here.
Yeah.
It's like 9.5 feet long. And it's got a point to it that's a natural point. So after I had made it into the staff and I had shaved all the bark off of it, really found an appreciation for woodworking at that time. I put the line around it, the small twine, coated it with olive oil and lemon juice, did everything like the kind of wood in the first century.
Yeah.
You know, sealed the twine in wax and honey, and I started walking around with it around base and noticed that I was feeling better when I walked with it.
Wow.
So I would feel sturdier as I had it, and then I would go and continue to have my lunch, and I would take that with me. And then God would be like, hey, go for a walk. So one day I'm walking around the base. I'm in my military uniform. I'm in my camouflage uniform and my boots, walking around with that thing.
Okay.
And someone calls the base police and says, yeah, hi, there's somebody that's, he's walking around with a pointed stick. I think he's going to, like, stab some peoples.
People's plural.
Right. And I'm like, okay. The base police didn't come, but they, started calling the chief, seeing if they saw me, because they saw me walk into the building. And they're like, okay, called my chief. My chiefs yell at me. They see me talking with somebody else while I was on my way back into the building, and they said that I was grandstanding, just like preaching on the corner. And I was like, no. What are you talking about? And somebody had actually said to me, you shall not pass, like making a joke when I was walking that.
Like
and
the
I'm
Gandalf
like,
and maybe the Moses.
Gandalf thing? Yeah, and it's like, and then I asked him the question. He was a junior sailor, and I asked him the question. I go, do you know where that comes from? And he goes, yeah, like Lord of the Rings. I was like, yeah, but do you know what that means and what that signifies? And he's like, no. So I told him about what was happening and what was taking place, and how that scene is very much an explanation for the gospel, and shared it with him. And he's like, oh, wow, man, you've given me a lot to think about. Thanks. It's like, okay, thanks. Bye. And then I leave, and I get reprimanded for having a staff and walking around with it. But God's like, don't worry, that was fine. I said, okay. And I took it back to my house, and that has been the staff I've used ever since.
Wow.
When I first got out of the Navy, and I was very nervous, and I'd go on long walks and couldn't necessarily do it very well, I would have that staff with me, and I would walk around downtown Nashville. I'd walk around in the woods and have that staff with me, and that staff has been almost like the physical embodiment for me of how he walks with me, and how in Psalm 23, how he talks about your rod and your staff will comfort me, and how that is such a comfort to have, that it's much more of just like a guiding post or a walking stick. It's different because it's the stability level. It's the protection level that can happen, or whatever needs to happen, if it can. It's something.
Yeah.
Rather than just nothing. So
that
it was able to comfort me in that aspect.
when you tell this whole story,
Yeah.
I think you and I think a lot alike. Maybe I have different ways of describing it, but you are able to see these different instances, these moments that God met you along the way, maybe even brought a tangible thing like the staff or the piece of wood into your life as a mnemonic to remind you of his goodness or his presence or whatever.
Mhm.
You have this powerful testimony. Catch me up a little bit more. I mean, what did you grow up in a Christian home? Did you? What's your salvation experience? And then now you're the director of family discipleship at your church.
Yeah.
How did all this kind of begin?
Okay, so I was raised in a Christian family, originally born in Southern California, just outside of Disneyland. So, well, that explains this voice. Um,
That's where my dad's from, by the way. He's there. He's from Huntington Beach.
well, hot dog, Huntington Beach.
Wow, we've taken a turn. We've taken a turn. I don't know if it's for the worst, but it's part of the story, so I'm going to just go with it.
Part of the story. So, originally born in Southern California, and then we moved to Tennessee, where I was raised in Nashville. And we moved back and forth between Southern California and the Nashville, Tennessee area 4 times in 26 months. And for those of you who don't know or forgot how big the U.S. is, that's a 3-day journey each way by car.
Yeah.
And I thought I lived in Texas for a while. Turns out it's just that flat and big. When you're 2, time is relative. So once we finally settled down in the Nashville area when I was 5, we would go to churches, but then we would bounce from church to church. We settled at a few churches, here and there, everywhere from Baptist to Methodist to Nazarene, to Church of God, Anderson, Indiana, to Assemblies of God. I mean, I went all around. I went from liturgical to charismatic and everywhere in between. And I was finally, I was saved and baptized at the age of 8 initially in a Southern Baptist church. Because in all honesty, I just wanted to go in the water in front of everybody else. I was like, oh, this is fun. But then when I was 13, I heard God's voice for the first time, audibly in my ear, which is strange to people who don't know what you're talking about. And I still remember every detail from that day. Walking back home from school, where I was often bullied, and he said, I want you to be in my ministry. He's like, it's going to be a while, it's going to be hard, but I want you to be in my ministry. I was like, okay, cool. So I told my mom, who told me to call my pastor. We did. This is while we were at the Nazarene church at the time. He was so excited about it, he talked about it the next Sunday.
In front of everyone?
In front of everybody.
Wow. That sealed the deal with your calling, I guess, right?
Yeah. I told my mom, and she's like, oh, okay, well, ask God to give you a sign, like Moses in the burning bush. I was like, okay. That same night, God gives her a dream where he tells her explicitly, Jeff is going to be in the ministry.
Wow.
And when I hit the next year, I'm 14 and I'm skateboarding without a helmet, going down a hill and bombing it like this. I slip back and I fracture my skull in 2 places. Where, I black out when I'm like, but I hit that part, bounce back up, roll down for 50 yards, and 2 days later, I was in the hospital. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And I was like, oh, and like I think I'm taking a nap in the street, then I go back out into black and I'm unconscious. My first words after I wake back up fully are, what happened? And then my mom tells me, and I'm like, cool. Because this was the time where you were, in that culture, it was cool to be hurt physically, because that meant you were actually doing something and you were trying stuff. I was like, okay. So afterwards, after that, I got healed. I was covered in prayer, and I was healed within a month, fully 100% ready and ready to go. Doctors thought it would take like 3 to 4. And a couple years later, I am in another Baptist church with my girlfriend at the time, who introduces me to her best friend. And we're like, okay, I'm going to figure out what's going on. And I'm attracted to her best friend. And I'm like, well, I'm 16. So let's ask the question, okay, God, what do and when you're 16 and a Christian teen in America, it's, which one is going to be my wife? Who am I supposed to marry, Lord? So I ask him that very question, and I say, with all the arrogance in the world, I'm not leaving until I hear from you. And I sit down in the fellowship hall of this church. The fellowship hall at the time was set up much like a small church area, like a small sanctuary. There are 4 groups of chairs, all laid out in an auditorium type of way with the pulpit up front. And after I wait for a minute, I hear these large sounds that there's, I hear a large bang and then chains rattling over and over again. And then it goes quiet. And then I hear in God's voice, the same voice that told me he wants me in his ministry, he says, get out. And I'm like, what? Get out? What does that mean? And I hear the banging and the chains again. And I'm like, okay, I got to open my eyes. I open my eyes and I look, and I have this vision of seeing a gigantic beast he was kind of like the mix of a gorilla and a rhinoceros kind of thing. I don't know. Not a doctor, not a demonologist. I don't know. But he was there, and then a shadowy figure in all black was holding the chain. And then I remember looking directly to my left and seeing another person leaning on a corner on a wall, and asked me very specifically, he says, what are you doing here? I'm like, okay. And then I look back and I look over, and as I'm looking over, I see all of the chairs in that fellowship hall are lit on fire. And in my section is not, but row by row by row, it goes up in flames. And I can feel the heat. It's in flames. And then I feel it's coming closer to me, and then it lights under my butt, and I'm like, okay, that's enough. And I run out in fear, complete tunnel vision. I take the longest way out of the church as possible for some reason, and jump out of not jump, but like burst through the front doors of the church, running through. I run down towards the parking lot, and then running towards the street, all with the same mindset of, I have to get out of here. And the only thing I can see is 10 feet in front of me. And I get close to the street, and I don't know what it was, but it grabbed the back of my collar and yanked me down.
Wow.
Where I was sitting down on the curb. And there I erupted in prayer. And someone told me later, after they saw that, another car had just sped by. I was like, oh, okay. But I had erupted in prayer and God, take this away. God, take this away. And this guy comes up, sits next to me. He's a part of the youth group that's there. He prays with me. We go through it. And then I see kind of in a transparent notion was an ambulance was there in the street with me in a bag being zipped up and being taken and put into the back of the ambulance. And I'm completely confused on what is going on, what this means. This whole thing like tormented me for years.
Wow.
Caused me a lot of trauma, and I had no idea what was going on. So it just became this, incredible journey. Like, okay, well, that was a vision from God, and this is happening. I mean, there were like numerous ones of explanations of something that was going on. This meant something, this meant something, this meant something. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I can, it explored a huge dive into the spiritual side of Christianity. I want to understand it. And then I'm like, okay, I have this dream where I'm visited by an angel. And he says, and I was in a fight with my girlfriend at the time. And he says, go fight for your girlfriend. Everything will be okay. I'm like, okay. So I get up, go take a shower, go and grab my guitar, go to her house, and I strum the guitar and I play Hey There Delilah while walking up the street in the most John Hughes way possible for some odd reason. And I'm, trying to be romantic and, doing the whole thing. And then I'm outside of her house playing it right in front of the door, expecting her to open the door and be like, Jeff, oh, so great. I forgive you of everything. And, well, that didn't happen. Instead, nobody came in and answered the door. I called her and I said, hey, where are you? And she said, oh, I'm out with my cousin. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, we just left. I've been there for like 10 minutes. What just happened? So we get into an argument and we break up. Things aren't all right. And on my way home, I'm hurt. And in my pain, I say, God, you caused all of this. And I recant my beliefs. I curse him. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And when I mean cursed him, I mean like I flipped him off and then said the word. But I recanted everything. All of my belief in Jesus, all of my belief in God. And the next morning I wake up, I feel freer. Right? And then I start diving into, what else is there. So I dive into other religions. I dive into Buddhism, dive into Hinduism and Sikhism and all the other isms. And to just many different theologies. And then I settle on something along the lines of the Force from Star Wars mixed with love. So kind of like, okay.
Higher power-esque.
Yeah, kind of like the power of, it all, there's love just connects everybody. We're all connected by love. Very hippie-ish. And that's when I met my wife in January of 2009. And I met her, proposed to her in that same April. And then we were going to be married, and we were picking out spots. And we found this wooden wedding chapel Well, that July, like a couple of weeks after we had found it, it gets struck by lightning and burns to the ground.
Are you
There were
serious?
no casualties. I am absolutely 100% serious.
I can't. So I'm tracking with you here on this whole narrative, but there are not many testimonies like this that I've heard so far.
I'm boggled. I am absolutely just. I'm still boggled by my own testimony. If I heard my own testimony, I'd be like, yeah, okay, Jonah.
Okay, yeah. Maybe
But
some people are saying
no.
that right now.
Probably. And I have evidence to back this up. I've collected the evidence over the years because I'm that same way. So, but anyway, it burned to the ground. So then we end up going to my parents' church, and we get married in this very old chapel that they have that was their original church. That used to be a slave quarters for Andrew Jackson. One of my other spiritual experiences that I had happened in the basement of that place before I met my wife. So having a wedding there where we're talking about love and under the grace of God and under the eyes of God and everything, being married by a pastor who was a friend of my family. We had seen a lot of things happen at that church, but it was, okay, this church has been a part of the life. And after I met my wife and after we married, I left for the Navy that next July. And I'm at boot camp. And then after I get done with boot camp, after I get, up to my first duty station, or not my first duty station, my first training area, Bobby comes and lives with me, and we're together. And then we start to try to have a family. We have one miscarriage. And then we have another miscarriage. Mm-hmm. And we're like, well, we should wait until after my first patrol. So by then I had orders to a submarine. And I go down there and, do Uncle Sam's Canoe Club for a patrol in December. And it was not like after Christmas, hey, we're going to wait. No, it was like, hey, welcome to the Navy. You're going. Celebrate Christmas underway.
Wow.
And we were running at that time 18-hour days, so lack of sleep was a commonality, which led to a lot of mental distress, both on pretty much the entire 160-person crew. We were gone for like 3 months, came back, and Bobby and I tried again. And then after that, it got to the 8-week mark, and sorry, somebody just came in to look at me in the window. Got to the 8-week mark, and the baby fell out.
Oh, man.
We were getting ready to get underway. We're having an inspection. I'm one of the drill monitors for the inspection, and I get a phone call in an emergency, and I immediately hightail it to the hospital.
Yeah.
Where Bobby's at the ER. And the doctor has absolutely zero compassion and zero empathy. And says, well, looks like you had a miscarriage. Really, doctor shares a lot. I appreciate you. Yeah. You're so very nice. Well, a week later, I get back and we go underway. So I don't have any time to be with my wife and comfort her, or find our comfort in each other like I did the first two. I get there and I'm underway and I see this, well, I don't see, but I get my Dolphins, the submarine qualification, and I'm able to go to a Bible study for the first time at the, urging of my parents and my wife, going to a Bible study. It's like, cool. Well, I go and we're studying 1 Corinthians. And we're reading and taking turns reading 1 Corinthians. And we get to the part where Paul talks about how a part of the tree is cut off if it's not part of the entire portion, if it's not together, doesn't produce any fruit. And we stop, and one of my shipmates says to me, he says, he points the knife hand at me hilariously and says, Breedwell, I think God is talking to you right here. I think he says you're not going to have kids until you're right with him.
Wow, strong
And I'm
words.
like, oh my, yes, right? I'm like, holy cow, okay. One, who are you? And two, really, this is the way you want to do this? So, right, knowing that he's already done this stuff before, knowing he's been trying to get my attention at this, so I'm like, okay, fine. You want my attention, you've got it. You want me back, all right. But before I do, you're going to answer for everything. I want to know everything. I want to know why things are the way they are. I want to know why Christianity has done the horrendous things that Christianity has done. I want to know why people have treated the way that they have. And I want to know your thoughts on it and where you stand on it. I want to know you at this part. I want to know everything. And God answers me later on. He goes, okay, game on. Like basically Isaiah 1:18, come now, let's settle this. Like your sins are like scarlet, I will make them as white as wool. And I fast, I do my best effort with it. I study his word in a Navy New Living Translation Bible that we had on board. I study that immensely, just reading every book as I can, going through different ones, and just kind of seeing all of this stuff, seeing the answer to a lot of these things that, oh, this is not in accordance with, this is not in accordance with, and then I'm writing all of my discovery that I'm learning throughout the text. I'm writing this in an email to my wife on how this is why things are the way they are, at least in this portion of it, and what God truly thinks of on how it relates to us, on how King Solomon, for example, was the first person to ever do a 3-section duty where you had an oncoming team, you had the on-project team, and then you had the off-going team. He was the first person to ever do that, at least within written record I knew at the time, which made it a lot more alive. It made it a lot more tangible to me.
Yeah.
And I get back. Bobby has done her own. Before then, in September, like 40 days later, after I had started this, I wish I was joking on the number. I really do. I repented and said, okay, I'm back. I believe wholeheartedly.
Wow.
And since that moment, I've been, in it to win it, so to speak. And I came back into town. My wife been saved. We started going to a church. And we started seeing a fertility specialist who was a Christian and committed. He said, look, it is my commitment that you are going to have a kid.
Yeah.
We prayed after our first meeting, which I'm like, hey, okay, all right,
Doesn't
cool.
happen very often.
Doesn't happen very often. So, I mean, it probably does in Florida where we were, but he's like, okay. And we try again, and it's our 4th miscarriage. Falls apart 4.5 weeks. Wasn't necessarily, Bobby said that my wife, said something didn't feel necessarily right about it. So we go off, we try again, we have a vacation set where we've got some leave. We go down to Universal, have this real marital bliss, type of adventure where we're just having fun within each other with, just being a happily married couple. And a couple of weeks later, we're scheduled to get baptized at the church we started going to. So we do. I get rebaptized since I had left the faith and recanted everything. I thought it was appropriate that I got rebaptized.
Yeah.
And then I turned around and baptized my wife. And we didn't know this at the time, but the implantation had already taken effect. It was our 5th pregnancy, and it was my first child was already in there. We had no idea. A couple weeks later, I get a dream that I'm swimming in the bottom of the ocean, and I see all of these babies starting to sink down. So I see a baby, I catch it. Let me back up. I see this other person who's shallower than myself catch a baby and bring it to the surface. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's exactly what I got to do. So I catch eyes on a baby. I swim over to it, catch the baby in my arms, and say, it's just you and me, baby. It's just you and me. Hang on in there. It's just you and me. It's just you and me. And I swim to the surface. And when I break the surface is when I wake up. That brain was racked that day. The next day, we're going to work out. I'm completely wrecked inside.
Yeah.
What could that mean? What is this? God has talked through dreams before and through other people. I mean, this is within the realm of his repertoire. So I ask, I'm like, God, what does this mean? And then he speaks to me by speaking through my voice, by using my lips. Like, it's really weird. But he said that the person who is above you or shallower than you is going to have their baby first. That's someone close to your family. The baby you caught was yours. And just like you told the baby and you held the baby and you said, it's just you and me. It's the same thing with our relationship, with me and with you. It's just you and me. And I was like, oh, wow. And we get it confirmed. Like a couple of weeks later, my wife's best friend, who was mathematically eliminated from being pregnant based on a number of health issues, discovers that she's 7 months pregnant.
Okay. A little late in the game.
And she was a bigger girl. So it was like that show, I didn't know I was pregnant, And she discovers she's 7 months pregnant, and now she has a kid. That kid is named Carly, still alive and well. And then later on, we found out a couple weeks later that Bobby is pregnant. And we're flabbergasted. And that was Ashlyn, my oldest.
Awesome.
And when I first held her in my arms, this level of completion and grace and love overwhelmed me.
Yeah.
And it was just like, almost like everything was coming full circle. It was that sense of completion. And it was like, it's just you and me.
Wow.
That's all you got to worry about. It's just you and me. And that forever changed my theology.
Yeah.
on the way that I encounter and explain to people the way Christianity works, the way a relationship with God works, was watching her grow up. I got to view it as if I was watching myself from God's point of view.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy. And I mean, you as a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right? And that was that mindset. Well, I go out to sea and things are better. And we're having a Bible study this time. I'm leading the Bible study. And we're getting ready to have another Bible study. But at the same time is a Periscope depth trip, which for submarines is a ship-wide event. Everybody that's on watch, or if you're off watch, you have a job for Periscope depth. Ships have been sunk at Periscope depth before. So it is very dangerous. It can happen. So it's a ship-wide event. Well, Bible study was also that time. I was like, okay, what are we going to do? Holy crap. Bible study. Well, Bible study's got to come first. I mean, this thing we're going over, it's going to be great. People are going to really be excited about it. We got to happen. And then, so I'm on watch, and I've got stuff to do during the Periscope depth trip. And then I hear God's voice, the same voice again, audibly in my ear, say, don't worry, I got this. And pretty soon later on, I hear a 1MC, which is our announcement circuit that goes all over the ship, or the submarine, was, attention, there's been a change to the plan of the day. The Periscope depth trip will now take place 1 hour later, which was the exact time we needed for the Bible study. And that can only happen by the commanding officer's discretion. And he showed up there at the Bible study. He wanted to go. So we did. And the Bible study was fantastic. The room was packed. And then afterwards, I'm sitting next to a couple of friends leaning up against a piece of equipment, and there's nothing behind the piece of equipment. It's just like dramatically important. But I hear in that same ear, in that same voice, in that same tone, I want you to be in my ministry. And I just smile, and I nod. I'm like, okay. And I tell the ship's lay leader that. He goes, oh, God called you to the ministry? Cool. I had it. You got it. Let's go. And I suddenly become the Protestant lay leader on board, and I had that position until I left. And God truly transformed that ship. We had, I think, we started out with like 2 people in the church on board, and we ended up somewhere around 12 to 14, 16 on our largest day. And then we had more people that would take the notes and the written sermons afterwards and would study that as a devotional.
Wow.
So there's no telling how many people God changed and then how many people God blessed through that. One of the guys who did it. Say that again?
No, sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, when you mentioned this whole story, it's like these divine series of events that no one could dream up, only God can orchestrate. Reminds me of Psalm 139:16, all the days ordained for me, written in your book before one of them came to be. And it's like along these divine sequences or series of events, there's these divine interactions or connections where you have this experience or meet this person, and it ricochets or connects and links, and then the whole narrative, the thread is woven to create this massive tapestry that it just doesn't seem, it seems outlandish. Your whole story seems too outlandish. Like, I'm not sure if I believe you. Is this a novel you're quoting? But it's your life testimony, right? And so
it's my life testimony. If it was a novel, I would love to read it.
Hey,
I would love to see how my story ends.
I know someone who could do the audiobook for it.
Hey, I know somebody who can write it.
That is a powerful story, man. And so I hear in that the doubt, the humanness of it. I think we're afraid to doubt sometimes. Hear the almost deconstructionism of the entire.
Oh, that was all over the place. Yeah.
And but in the end, it's almost that fatherly figure that you alluded to at the very beginning. I didn't know the nuance of it when you were really saying it, but I got you, baby. You know, holding you, carrying you along the whole way. If you, after telling this whole story, what is one thing that you would encourage people, Christians or not, doesn't really, wherever they are in their walk with God, you know, or even if they don't even call him God, the higher power, the force, whatever they may call him. Right. What is one powerful thing you would say to them? Maybe people are watching.
The one thing I would say is a truth that I've lived through over and over and over again. And it goes back to Peter walking on the water with Jesus. That when things are at their darkest, that's when God has his hands in the deepest. Just like Peter, he sank. And when you sink and you're an adult body weight, you fall and you go underwater. And the water at night is black. Yeah. There is no light. But to see and to feel Jesus reach down and grab your hand and say, child, come on, what are you doing? Why don't you look away? It's that peace that's there every time. He's there. That when things are the worst in your life, at their absolute darkest, or even at their absolute brightest, but especially at the dark, God is there. It may not seem like it. You may not be able to see him, but he is there.
Yeah.
And he's working in you and in your life. It's not done yet. It gets better.
I resonate. I think there's people watching or listening right now who probably even needed to hear that. They go through a wild ride, may or may not be as crazy and as unique as your testimony, but everybody's going to go through the surface of the water and start sinking at some point. And that's the encouragement, man. That's why I'm so happy to have you on the show. I feel like there's a tone to your voice. I've been listening to a lot because you sent me your recordings of Mind of the Missionary. I've heard it a million times. It's really weird how much I've heard you talk. But there's this time when you slow everything down. You talk fast. You're telling the story. It's exciting. It's electric. Mm-hmm. But then there's a time when you slow it down. And I've heard this many times in your recordings. Right. And then suddenly I think that's the tone or the tempo maybe that God takes with us sometimes. Not this frenetic pace and I'm going to reach down and don't worry, look up at me. It's that fatherly, it's going to be okay. I'm here. Yeah. I really appreciate that heart for seemingly being able to connect with where people are at in their journey and then speak into that particular point in their life. And I think it's going to cause a ripple effect that really changes and transforms people's lives.
Oh, God willing. I mean, He gets all of the glory for anything I've done for me being here now after completely cursing him. It's only by his mercy, the fact that I am in his church, ministering and being with people in missions and people with families and people with communication. It's only through him and through his grace and mercy.
Yeah.
It's the only reason why I'm here. And there's a reason why he says, "Be still and know that I am God." It's much more than just, "Hey, be still and know that I am God." Okay, just calm down, Becky.
I thought you were gonna go back to the SNL Chris Farley, like, "Hey, shut your big yapper."
Hey, shut your big yapper, or you're gonna live in a van down by the river.
Yeah,
I said it like
that's the voice of some fathers, probably not so much our father.
Right. But it's always like, but if you think about it, when you're really, really panicking, just as in that story and in that psalm, be still, okay? And know that I'm God. I've got this.
Yeah.
You're okay.
Yeah.
It's like a little baby crying. You know, you have an infant crying in your arms because they're hungry or they went poop in their diaper. They're uncomfortable. They have no idea what's going on around them. They have no idea of the danger that might be coming or the fact that we have to get out of this mall before I can change your butt. They have no idea. All they know is that one moment, just like us. All we know is that one moment that's affecting us.
Yeah.
But we trust God with everything else, so it's like, be still and know that I am Dad.
Yeah. Well, what you're describing are these moments in our human experience. They traverse geography and culture and language. What you're saying and the words that God would say to us are particularly applicable here in Thailand as they are in China, as they would be in England, as they are in America. And that's this human experience we're having. Despite all the uncertainties, the God who created culture and race and people and endless mountains and valleys knows and understands every minute detail of our infinitesimal little life and cares. And it doesn't seem to add up. In Chinese, we would say, "Niu tou bu dui ma zui." The horse's lips don't match up to the cow's mouth. In other words, it doesn't line up. It doesn't make sense. Why the infinite God cares so much about this finite, infinitesimal speck of a person, but he somehow imprinted us with his imago Dei, the image of God, and people matter. I know we could keep talking forever and keep going. I'm not necessarily on a goal of breaking, say, like Joe Rogan's longest interview episode. But I do appreciate just this. It's almost fatherly, almost brotherly, elder brother. I think what you mentioned a while ago. Mm-hmm. This voice, this tone you have, and I just really appreciate that. I think you as a person, and then what you've blessed me with in making The Mind of a Missionary into an audiobook. Let me ask you this. You did The Mind of a Missionary. Are you looking for other opportunities to connect with authors, to do more audiobooks, and kind of bring this tone that you just mentioned throughout your whole testimony into the narrative of their stories?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, you can go onto my link tree, and it has a contact info button. Is the second button down after the Mind of a Missionary link, which, by the way, if you haven't left a review yet, what are you waiting for?
Shameless plug. Love it.
But I would love to be a part of someone's book again, or to help out with video games, or to help out with any voiceover work that the project needs.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is, if you need an actor that is, a male actor of some sort,
a male Scot, Irishman, Kiwi, Australian, Indian, Chinese, almost everybody. I haven't heard.
Okay, almost everybody. Okay. That's a great time for a lot of people. to come across, especially if I don't have her there.
There's the multi-dimensional aspect of Jeffrey Bruville's voice right there. Well, I'm going to mention that, but the link tree, that's also known as the internet for those who don't know what Linktree is. linktr.ee/G Breedwell. Of course, you'll see it all across this video as well on the lower thirds here. But I think how you have woven this narrative of your testimony during this conversation. I didn't know your story as clear as I do now. I'm sure there's many more nuances. But as you've woven the story and brought in almost these different voices, you did it inevitably. I don't think you tried to do it. Unwittingly, kind of just entered into some of your tones. I catch a sense of not only who you are, but the biggerness of God's tone, I think, for us, for you, for humankind. And I appreciate that tone. I'm saying it through the lens of the mind of a missionary and how you brought it to life with the audiobook. But you also have this way of speaking when you're doing the narration of God in your testimony that kind of brings us away from the regal or the regality of God and the King James Version, brings it down to us and what we need to hear. I just have to say, again, I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I greatly appreciate it. I really do. I think there is, something that has been lost in the fact that we've linked in the regality, as you said, from regardless of where the text has been, regardless of where the language it was written in, of this ruler party from on high, how we have that, but we also have this personal.
Well, we have the ruler from on high. But he's also the same one who left the most exclusive gated community in all the universe to become human. So there's a juxtaposition in God's personality that we often miss. He is the ruler on high, the majestic one, but he's also Jesus Christ, God incarnate among us. So what do you do with the tone of his voice, the timbre?
And he's the Holy Spirit who's there with you always and forever and has always been and breathes life into you.
Yeah.
And it's that, for lack of a better word, the whole situation that is the Trinity that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
It's something that we cannot truly grasp right now in our current state. We can make metaphors, but we can't really understand it.
That's why you call it the situation. I've never heard anybody refer to the Trinity as the situation. That situation, for lack of a better term. Yeah. But we're all on the situation. We'll quote you on Twitter for that. The situation equals the Trinity. People will not get it until they hear the context of this.
Yeah, and then the situation is going to tweet back, hey, I may not be God, but I certainly look like him.
Yeah. And then there might be references to the shack and the different tones of the voice of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit as seen through the shack, the book. But I'll tell you, man, I just so appreciate your heart for people. God's grace and glory in your life, in your testimony, is evidently coming out of you. And I just really appreciate it. You taking the time even to be on this podcast. I know, like I said, we could keep talking and going, but I'm really excited for this next journey that you're in, the next season of life, and the people who are going to be impacted along the way, because you might not realize it, but this thread is being woven and strands are weaving together, creating this tapestry that we'll only look back and see in retrospect, oh, that's what that instance or the moment created and caused. I hope we're able to see that more often in the present than in retrospect, but sometimes we don't get that privilege.
We don't, and I supremely thank you. And I can tell, both, like in your book and in your voice as well, David, I can hear, the time honored and specified piece in your voice, which I get now that I could not get in your book. And I could not get, well, I mean, I got that part in your book, but I couldn't get the real understanding of the level that you have. But now that I've read the story, and what comes to mind specifically is you trying to smuggle Bibles into China through that book, and then going back and forth, and then just wearing down the policeman there, and just, you know, wearing him down, but at such a level that you're just, there wasn't smug, there wasn't, you know, it's just a quiet, confident peace that was still there, knowing you had to do it. But now that you've come out of that, and I would probably be willing to wager the fact that there's many more stories like that within your life that has happened both in Thailand and here in America and all across the 1040 window and all across the world. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to record your audiobook.
Wow.
And to meet you in such a way that you not only exposed me to a deeper side and a heart for missions and a heart for people, but you also did such an amazing thing where you allowed other people's stories to come in and really take this whole thing by storm, where you got to give people all sides of the story, which they have only been given maybe one side, and then it fell to the plagues of time. And that's just the first chapter of your book. You know, and I can only say that I am very honored and thankful that you were able to and willing to do this. So thank you.
Thank you for your words. I mean, I felt like this conversation was going to be me saying that to you, because you were so generous with your time and your talents. And, but yeah, I guess what you get at the end of it, we all got these unique narratives, right? Everybody's story is unique and individual, and somehow they intrinsically matter to God. They ricochet and connect into different people's lives. I'm amazed that whatever the initial clash or ripple that caused us to meet and connect is brought us to this point. And I just feel, I thank you for your words. And I feel the same thing about you, Jeff. See, I called you Jeff. You told me before we start recording, if you know me, if we're friends, you can call me Jeff. If you don't know, if we're strangers, it's Jeffrey. So yeah, I've switched.
And you said you were going to establish the relationship. So now we got to put it on Facebook. To make it Facebook official.
Yeah, here, we'll do that after this recording. But I will. I've changed from all our emails now. From now on, it's not Jeffrey, it's Jeff, because we're friends, buddy. But no, man, I appreciate you, and look forward to staying in touch. And I'm excited for other people to connect with you, because I think there's that. Again, I keep pointing back to the timbre, the voice, the tone, the accent, whatever. You're gifted in these ways, and you can help bring other people's works to life in unique ways. So anyway, bro, I appreciate you. Thanks for coming on today, and so good to finally meet you in this way.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. It was a pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you again for inviting me on and for doing this whole thing, getting everything started. You started by saying yes.
Awesome.
So it was that one tiny 3-letter word that only gets about 7 points in Scrabble. So
you've done that math, it seems. So, I mean,
take that, Milton Bradley.
Yeah, the Y is 4 or 5. I don't even know. It sounds like you know. Must be a 5.
I've been playing a lot of Words with Friends lately.
Okay. Awesome. On that note, God bless. We'll stay in touch.
All right. God bless you as well. Man. And may you ever be blessed in your drive.
Thank you. You too.
Missions Pulse. Know God's heart, join His mission. This podcast is powered by Within Reach Global. Subscribe, watch, and listen on YouTube today. Visit missionspulse.com.